This is the Page Publishing Book Club. Alice Stockton Rossini here. Rob Barrett's my engineer over there. And you, how you doing? Welcome to another week of inspiration to kickstart your imagination. Check out Michael Anthony Roberts. He managed convenience stores for almost 2 decades. Big deal, right? What happens in a convenience store? Well, Roberts gives us some valuable insight into the kind of people who wind up working at convenience stores in his book entitled Savannah Girl Street Smart. All right, Michael, what's the deal with this main character?
The character, Sarah, is a con artist and a scammer, and as a manager, that's what you work with.
Really?
Oh, God, you will never believe it. And in this book, she steals a job from somebody, which I thought was interesting, and that was kind of based on a real thing. And several of the things she did to people were based on real events.
So she's a composite.
Yes. She's troubled youth, having trouble with her single mother. Single mother comes up here and basically dumps her and goes off of her fiancé. She is 18 in a couple of weeks. She has the change in her pockets. She has a small part-time job for 2 hours a night at a convenience store just doing cleanup. And the rent's paid at the end of the month by a landlord who likes peeking in her windows. Everything she has is gone. She has a bunch of clothes in the corner because her mother and her fiancé had military movers come and clear out the entire place.
Oh, man.
It's what she does to survive. And what she does to get a job, to get in with the boss, her idea was always to be the perfect employee, the one a manager could always trust because they're always there for you. They're wonderful. And she was a very good worker. Meanwhile, she's scamming, does credit card fraud. She'll sell blood at the plasma centers. There are people she meets. Some are schemers like hers. Others are just folks. Now, what hurts her is she's only 18. So there's a lot of things she cannot do legally.
Right.
But she scams her way into things. She works out different deals with people, what to do and what not to do. She finally runs to a very clever accounting manager named Beverly. And she likes Beverly because Beverly is teaching her things about money. She does have a secret of how she finally begins getting things, getting ahead in life. And if people discover it, she will go to jail for a very long time. She did meet somebody, and his crime was his means to provide. And they popped him. And she was thinking, well, maybe he's not going to be cellmates. You know, and it's what you have to do. I'm actually on finishing up the third one of the series. This is the first one.
And then there's 2 more. There's follow-ups to this?
And as she progresses, people she meets, I develop the characters more as the storylines go along. As she's getting older, things change. And as she says one time, she changes. They went to Busch Gardens. And about the pickpocket scam. You see this big, nice sign saying, watch out for pickpockets, check your valuables. First thing most people do is they'll tap where their money is, make sure it's still there. You just told the spotter where it is. Get the wallet, you scam the cards, okay, and then you get the wallet back to them as soon as possible. Now, when that happens, the first thing you will do is you'll check your money, correct? It's all there. You might call in your cards, no charges or anything. You think it's cool, right? When you get about 20 to 30 sets of people's cards and everything, you get your smartphone, you put your credit card reader on the smartphone, and you set up a dummy company. On a Friday night, you begin scamming. Keep it below $75. So I'll go through your cards one after the other. You do it a Friday night because the scam alerts aren't really activating. And I'll keep doing this all weekend. If one of your cards says, we're maxed, toss it, I'm done. Now, come Monday morning, when you try to use a card, it will say, declined. You call your company. They say, ma'am, you charged up $3,000 this weekend. And you say, no, I did not. They investigate. They say, you're correct. They credit your account. Meanwhile, the dummy corporation has now used to transfer all the money to a real one where she can get the cash out of. So at the end, you don't get hurt. The merchant gets money because he did everything correctly.
Right.
And the credit card company kind of takes in the shorts, but she has cash, so she's happy.
You're doing a public service, really, with these books.
Some ways, yeah. And I'm just having a good time. I've gotten several articles published in newspapers and one in a magazine for the Navy. And it's just something I am really enjoying doing. I can always say, I wrote a book. If the books don't sell, everybody in the world is going to get a copy for Christmas.
Well, there you go. That's the attitude. That's a really good attitude. Next up, Michael Stiemel is the first to admit he made a wrong turn at a young age, and still, he managed to become successful in the telecommunications industry. But the more successful he became, the worst, the downward spiral of his life. We find out all about it in his book entitled Fool on a Hill. Michael.
Yes, it's basically, when the cellular industry was just taking off is when I got into the business, and I had it right at the right time. And obviously the demand over the last 20, 30 years for cellular has been so great, and that's what made my career flourish like it did.
So what happened?
The alcohol and the addiction to the alcohol and so forth that I started at a young age, and throughout my career, the more money I made, it just contributed to the more drinking, and eventually things just ran out, and the alcohol took control of everything I had.
Did you have a family?
I had married my high school sweetheart, and I had two daughters that were my whole world, and properties and businesses, and a lot of things going good for me.
When you say you started at a young age, how young were you?
I was 13 when I started drinking.
Usually there's that moment where you hit rock bottom. When did that come?
We ended up from being successful and having pretty much the money to do whatever we wanted. The more the alcoholism took hold, the less I really cared, and things started to run out, and I kind of gave up. And as the money ran out, we ended up bankrupt and ended up in a divorce and so forth. And then eventually got to the point where I tried to take my life.
Oh, jeez. So what turned it all around?
At that point, I decided that I didn't have anywhere to go but upward, and I decided to turn my life around. And if I was going to be any good to anyone, especially to my daughters, that I would have to change my lifestyle and then change my ways. I got help for the alcoholism, and then I got active in 12-step groups.
Okay.
Then eventually got active in church and so forth.
How long has it been?
14 years.
Were you able to get back on track and work and...
Yes, eventually, after a few years, I had a long battle and fought for custody of my daughters, got full custody of them, and I've had full custody of them ever since, and they are now 16 and 18, and I'm back running my businesses again, and I'm still self-employed and still running my businesses.
So you're able to handle the pressure now that you couldn't handle before?
Yes, very much so. When you're in that situation, if you're falling down into that hole, there's always hope, and you can work your way out of it if you really try.
Is this the kind of book you would find at an AA meeting, or how do you get your book to the people who really need it?
I've given it to a lot of people along the way, and I spoke at many schools and churches and other things throughout the years, delivering basically the same message, which is not to give up and to stay focused on what you're trying to accomplish.
Oh, it's a great message, Michael. Thank you. Michael Davidson decided to write about his second wife. Her name is Alina, and it's also the title of his book. A captivating subject, wasn't she, Michael?
She had a very tragic existence, and she was a very beautiful lady, and it was pretty much a classic situation. And I just got an idea many years ago that I could write a biography. I didn't know it would take 18 years.
It took you 18 years to put this all down on paper?
From the moment I decided till the moment Paige put some covers on it, it was 18 years.
Her life really sounds so tragic.
Yeah, actually, the first time I saw her, she was taking care of her grandfather, and she was married, but it was, on the rocks. I remember when she walked into the room, I took one look at her, and I was gone. I was hooked. Same thing happened to her first husband when he described how he saw her, and we got to know each other. She went back east, and she came out to the West Coast, and we went on from there.
You say here that she suffered lifelong untreated bipolar disorder.
I didn't know anything about psychology, and back then it was called manic depression. She called it, her little name for it was she had to let the little girl out to play. And I came to realize later that was the manic condition when the little girl went out to play, because she played in some very bad places. Somehow later I became a psychotherapist, and I began to realize what had happened. And to go back, when I first had the idea, I was at the wedding of her daughter, and it was out of Denver, Colorado, at a lodge at a lake. in their ceremony right on the edge of the lake, and it was about 200 people, and she married into a wealthy family. And it was just a classic thing. When I sat back and looked at it as a writer, I thought, my God, this is so classic. I could write a great biography. And I went over and told her what I had in mind. Of course, she didn't care. She was in bad shape by then. She was alone. She had a borrowed dress on, and she'd been through, her thing with the guy that she'd lived with for 8 years. So I started then to write, and I wrote solid for about 4 or 5 years, and along with a couple of years of research, and eventually other things came up, and I let the book sit for several years, and then I wrote some more, and then I took a rest, and finally I decided I had to finish it, so I put it together actually in a hardback for the family. All the family members and the people that I interviewed got a hardback, and then years later I decided that I would publish it. You're going to learn that there was a woman who had a disease, and she drew men to her, and they took advantage of her, lived their life through her, and never understood what was wrong with her, and she didn't either. And it's just a tragic story about a woman, and probably a lot of people experience the same thing, but I just happened to be around to write it.
It's a good thing you did, Michael. And with that, we have to take a very short break, but we are coming right back. Do not go anywhere. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you: printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
Welcome back to the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Thanks for joining us tonight. George Proferis had a career in criminal justice, then private counseling. Now, he's an author. He has published 5 books through Page Publishing, his most recent entitled A Case for Murder. It's the 3rd book in his Island Mystery series. It takes place in his old stomping grounds, not far from where we are right now in Manhattan, on the east end of Long Island. Right, George?
I grew up there. I spent all of my life, and I'm still a lifelong Islander, so I'm still out here. A winter storm at the end of January takes the East End by surprise. It also serves as the backdrop to the discovery of 2 frozen bodies buried under a drift of snow in their car on an unpaved lane near the coastal village of Ocean View. The initial investigations lean toward accidental deaths, but subsequent investigation reveals that the deaths could possibly be homicides. And the community is shocked when they learn who the 2 people that are found in the car are. They're both prominent people from the community. And the main character in my East End Mysteries is named Mark Lorenzo. He's an attorney who was a former police officer who was wounded and unable to continue, and went to law school and became a lawyer. He receives an anonymously printed note, and we have a lot of characters in this one. A fugitive from a federal witness protection program. There's a contract killer, and a man he works for who's a mob boss from another state. The 2 families are torn apart and humiliated by the deaths of the 2 victims. I have a newly licensed private investigator like Lorenzo, a retired police detective, who joins forces with him. And that's basically what we're talking about with this book. I'm not your young, emerging author. I'm an old man, actually. But I'm pretty active and energized by what I'm doing. My wife, who's a retired school teacher after 35 years, is sort of my editor here at home before we submit our material. So it works pretty well, Alice.
Well, good for you, George. You're doing something you really love. How many people can say that? And you're becoming a local celebrity. Nothing better than that. Gotcha Kanko is from Johannesburg, South Africa. He's written his autobiography. It's entitled Game Changes Decades of Dreams Later, because he wanted to use his success as an illustration of the fortitude it takes to get through life sometimes. So where do we begin, Gotcha? I mean, you talk about sexual abuse at the age of 15, being accused of murder, discovering your sexuality.
This is a story of an African boy who sat there wanting more out of life, decided to take off and go to what is considered in South Africa the city of gold, which is Johannesburg. My parents bought me a ticket, a plane ticket, and it was only as when that plane was about to land that reality finally hit me that I actually didn't have any place to stay when I got there. So fortunately, one of the flight attendants that were on that flight was a friend of mine, and that's literally how I found where I was going to stay. And he said, "Why don't you come and stay with me?" So basically, I worked my way, stayed with him in Johannesburg, and this was a time when there was a sexual revolution that was happening in Johannesburg. And I'm coming from a culture and a background where sexuality was taboo, and I also didn't understand what was happening in my life and in my sexuality, because much as I had a girlfriend, I also realized that I was also attracted to guys. And it got to a point where it affected me emotionally and psychologically, to a point I ended up having to go through counseling. The psychiatrist was suggesting a lot of things, including shock therapy and shocking the gayness out of me. So fortunately, I ended up meeting a hairdresser who ended up being a brother and a mentor to me. And he was a hairdresser to every celebrity in South Africa, which kind of kickstart my career. And then I got a job with a television station and ended up being one of the executives in the television station. And corporate South Africa wasn't really accepting of a gay man in positions of power. For quite some time, I had to tone down and live a lie. I had to decide, do I do what society expects of me, or do I break the chains and follow my heart and follow my happiness at the risk of being shunned by society, which is literally what happened. Anyway, a friend of mine who was also a celebrity had a cough. He had this nasty cough over days. 4 days later, that guy was dead. It turned out, well, I got to hear this through other friends, that the family was making statements that, they knew that their child would never use traditional medicine and definitely never drugs. It was known by everybody, but never discussed, that our friend was actually using cocaine. And I suppose in the process of grieving and trying to point fingers, then the family said I had something to do with that because he was staying with me. It was only after the hospital released the autopsy report, when it came out that it was actually drugs that had caused the renal failure and everything. And since a lot of people have considered me to be successful, I wanted them to understand what that journey entailed, because I read a caption the other day, which I found quite profound, that many celebrated the butterfly, but very few conversations are ever told about the metamorphosis of how it gets to be the beautiful creature that it is. So long and short of it is, that's how the book came about. I wanted to use my life as a reflection of whatever your circumstances, where you come from, it is up to you to decide how your life changes.
That is so true, Gotcha. Just another example of, everybody's got something, no matter what it looks like from the outside. Nobody escapes. There was a tragedy in the little town of Lima, Ohio, and Marianne Jackson Baker hopes that by sharing her story, entitled Shattered Heart, it'll make a difference in someone else's life. Marianne, I can't even imagine writing a book like this after going through what you've gone through.
Well, my son was murdered, and he was unarmed, and I decided I wanted to share my story.
How old was he?
24, and he was my only child.
What happened?
Well, there was an altercation that night, and they exchanged words, him and the guy that murdered him, and a fight ensued. Then later on that night, they had another fight. It was actually my husband at that time's cousin that murdered him.
What was his situation?
Well, that evening they were playing a game of pool, and there was a wager on the table, and the guy was saying that my son didn't pay him all the money for that bet, and then a argument ensued, and then later on that night a fight ensued.
How long ago was this?
2001. I figured it was time for me to tell my story, because with a lot of the violence out there, you have the stories out now that people getting murdered, and they're saying that like the white cop killing the black young man that's unarmed. Well, in this case, my son was murdered by a black man, and he was unarmed. So I felt like it was time to share my story.
Did this guy go to jail?
Yes, he got a 19 to life sentence, coming up for parole in 2019. I think he should have either got a life sentence or even faced the death penalty.
Now, you write about forgiveness in your blurb.
Yes.
Can you forgive this guy?
I haven't got there yet. I pray on it daily, but I haven't got there yet.
When he comes up for parole, are you going to have a say?
Definitely.
And what are you going to say?
That I don't think that there's been any remorse shown, and if there has, it was just a senseless act. It should have never happened. This is something that should have never happened. My son was unarmed, and it was something that should have never taken place in the first place. I just want to share with the world the things that people don't really know that has happened. In my case, share my story as far as a mother that has lost her child and her only child, about the gun violence, and about perpetrators that even, are out there and they're taking the lives of unarmed victims. And I think that there's an audience out there that it should touch a lot of people, definitely.
All right, Marianne, thank you. Willie Wallace has a very simple message in his book entitled The Resonance of God, His Words with Love. Willie.
I wrote it because I want people to understand the power of being good, the power of being righteous. By studying the moral behavior attributes of God, that is an upliftment to my life, and it's been an upliftment for me teaching my children and people I come in contact with.
Have you always lived a Christian life?
Well, I grew up in the Baptist church, and they showed movies of all of the Bible stories. So they were the first movies I saw, and I fell in love with them. I've done a lot of things in life. I've been a salesman, banker. I've always kept God first.
Not everybody can say that. You have children, you married?
Well, right now I'm single. I've been married and have 11 children. I had 12. One died at birth. I have 11 now. They're all adults.
That's a lot of kids.
And I'm having grandchildren now. And I want to leave a legacy of letting them know what their grandfather believed in. And that's the main purpose.
And it's what you think we should all believe in?
I really do. I know that that's not going to be the way it's going to be, but I think it will do justice to everyone's life if they look at the laws of God and acknowledge them.
Okay. Now, you said you're blind.
Legally blind. I have a surgery in 2 weeks to remove something off from one of my eyes where I think I'm going to get sight back.
I was going to say, it's got to be very difficult to write. You have to have somebody transcribe.
No, I can type very good. The Division of the Blind helped me out a lot. They gave me talking typing teachers. I can type 50 words a minute now, and I have Kurzweil, which I can scan things into my computer, and it reads it all back to me. So I can do everything. I'm not limited at all.
Oh, that's great. All right. So basically, you're getting up there in age, you have grandchildren, and you wanted them to know how you lived your life, hoping that they can do the same.
Right. It can be a guide. So I've never been arrested, never been in trouble, none of those things. And I think it was because I followed God's way, and it helps a lot.
I mean, you know what? If you put your faith in God, it sure makes life easier. That's for sure. Thanks, Willie. Finally, we're going to leave you with 2 cents from Charles Penny Aiken. He's written his second book with Paige. It's entitled 1 Cent More. Your first book was called Penny for Your Thoughts, right? So it's all about the penny.
Everyone knows me as Penny. That's my nickname. I weighed 2 pounds when I was born, and my grandmom said, David's not much larger than a penny, and it's been with me 82 years.
Jeez, so you have more words of wisdom for us.
Well, yes, ma'am, I hope. This book is somewhat more about feelings and love for your spouse, without actually calling their name, I was married for 51 years before my wife passed away. And I write about a little bit of everything. My first book is about children, animals, 9/11. I love cowboy poetry. And I write feeling as if I am you experiencing that. Totally portrait. Each one has 50 poems in it. And I will probably do another one at the end of the year with Paige. I also recite my poetry. I go around the retirement homes. I can recite over 1,400 lines of poetry from memory. And I do 1930, 1940 radio commercials for them verbatim. I remind them of songs we used to sing. But, they love to hear things that you feel.
That's great. So can you recite something for me from 1 Cent More?
You know what? I have not memorized that much out of 1 Cent More.
Okay.
But I can recite you one real quickly out of the first book.
Let's do it.
It's the first poem I actually wrote in high school, and it's called The Steeple. Oh, steeple high and mighty, do you really hold up the sky? Does your bell ring to awaken the angels as the billowy clouds go by? Or does your bell ring because you're lonely as you stare with majestic power? Will you warn us on judgment morning that this will be the hour? Do you help the Lord with his business as you reach so far above? Or are you just a connecting link to bring us all his love?
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I think it's great that you travel around and you recite your poetry. Do people buy your books?
Sometimes they do. They love to do the e-book sort of thing.
Right.
Well, I carry books in my car.
Do you? You carry books in your car?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Ever sell anything out of your trunk?
I do. I hand out business cards no matter where I go. If I'm shopping, especially if I see a lady with a baby in a buggy, I immediately recite 4 or 5 lines from a poem and give them a card. I try to whet their appetite just a small amount.
Does that work out for you?
It seems to work because they always promise me that I'm going to buy one of your books.
So Greenville, South Carolina, they open their arms.
Yes, ma'am. I'm originally from Columbia, the capital of South Carolina, but I've lived here for 61 years. Okay. And if you walk around and ask who Charles Aiken is, most people don't know. They know Penny.
All right, Penny Aiken. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for calling. I appreciate that.
I can't wait to talk to you again.
Well, thank you, ma'am.
Maybe you can write 2 cents more.
Well, it may be. I wanted to keep that theme going.
Penny, you just made my night. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. Thank you, Rob, for being the best engineer on planet Earth. And we'll be back next week for another edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Or you can download us at 710WOR.iheart.com.